I think this is my cue to start since the door was closed. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my immense pleasure to welcome you at the panel Consequences of the Late or Denied Balkan States EU Accession, organized at the Belgrade Security Forum 2019 in cooperation with the European Academy of Diplomacy, VISEGRAD School of Political Studies, and with support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. My name is Patricia Chomicka. I'm the head of the Warsaw Security Forum. There is a trend that we are observing in previous years at the events such as this. It is that we are looking into the future with a very cautious optimism, if with any optimism at all. The enthusiasm that we might have had in the previous years in regard to the state of the international affairs is fading and is mostly gone by now. Once again, at the end of history has not come, and we are facing more complexity and many more disruptions than we were expecting. The same adjustment and same caution needs to be applied to the future of possible enlargement of the EU in the Balkans. The panel is meant to be a reminder that the Balkans will not be waiting without an end for the EU to make up its mind when it comes to the accession, and is also a premonition of the fallout that we might be witnessing very soon if the societies of the Western Balkans will be growing wary of waiting in line. Allow me to introduce you to my esteemed speakers that will do their best to shed the light on the current state of the affairs and peer into the future of the region. Going alphabetically, let me introduce you to Professor Rožydas Daskalowski, professor at the Faculty of Security at the University of St. Clement Ochrydzki, and director of the Council of Europe Supporters School of Public Policy, Mother Teresa. Ms. Milica Kravic, radio and TV journalist, co-author of radio show Woman in a Box, host of morning show at the public broadcasting service Radio Novi Sad. Ms. Edlira Joni, executive director for the Center for Public Impact, journalist, activist, a fellow at the McCain Institute in Washington, D.C., and Mr. Borna Sor, CEO of Haha Productions, journalist, satirist, main writer and host of the satirical show Primetime on the regional channel N1. All of our speakers have Twitter accounts, so I do encourage you to tweet at them during the panel. And please do tweet us. We have only 1 hour for the panel at BelSec Forum with your questions, and I'll do my best to introduce them to our speakers in the debate. The first question is directed to all of our speakers and will allow them to make some opening remarks of their own. What, in your opinion, will be the consequences of delay or denial of accession for the Western Balkan states to the EU? Rožydas?
Well, first of all, I think we should make it clear what do we talk about when we talk about enlargement. It's basically, for the Western Balkans, is a process of double dealing. Italians have a saying, double gain. What I mean by this? I mean by this that the elites in both the EU and the Western Balkan countries are not very honest and sincere in the process. On the one hand, you have the so-called European elites, the European Union elites, who have been really reluctant to speed up the process and, for example, have invented specific mechanisms and processes to slow down the process. For example, you can think about the Berlin process as such thing. I mean, don't take me wrong. This Berlin process is very useful. It spurs cooperation among the countries. We have seen nowadays that President Vučić, Prime Minister Zaev, and Prime Minister Rama are working on so-called mini Schengen. There have been a lot of positive things dealing on within this Berlin process. But in essence, the Berlin process is a consolation prize. And it started, you know very well, in 2014, and it's still going on to a certain extent. So on the one hand, you have Western elites which are not very much interested to have a quick accession of the Western Balkan countries to the EU. On the other hand, you have elites in the Western Balkans who are, yes, of course, proclaiming that they are in favor of the European enlargement, they are in favor of the accession of their countries, but they are not very much focused on the domestic work. They are not very much sincere in the reforms within their societies and their countries. What they're actually interested is to use the whole process of EU enlargement to their benefit, and their political benefit that is. Benefit to gain power, to keep power, to use, some cases misuse funds for dedicated to the countries of the Western Balkans for enlargement. It's a process where elites are also in relation to what citizens of the region and the citizens of Europe think about the process. Citizens in the Western Balkans are in a big illusion that enlargement means more money for their society. They are not really accepting that this is a big transformation of the societies, that this is a big democratization of their societies. It's in their mind is very simple. Getting to the EU means more funds, better life for them either through improved economic conditions in their societies or through the possibility to basically work in the EU as all member states have the possibility to do. On the other hand, elites in EU, and in particular in the old EU, so that's basically the rich part of European Union, they take into the consideration that there is a negative opinion among the citizens concerning enlargement. If you look the polls within the Eurobarometer, you will see that the countries where citizens are firmly against further enlargement are the countries of so-called old Europe. So that means Benelux, France, Germany, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, and nowadays even Czech Republic, Italy as well. So in a way, they respond to the pressure the citizens in their countries put on their own dealing with local politics, national politics. And in a way, what we are witnessing today or yesterday in a couple of few days is the French objection, Macron's objection to the opening of accession talks to Macedonia and Albania because of for many reasons, but also because of local national politics. So in a way, I think this whole double dealing with the process should really stop, and I think we should really be clear what do we want. We want democratization of the societies, democratization of politics and policy making in the Western Balkans, but we also need sincere support from the European Union in this process. And that means when a country fulfills some criteria which are set within the enlargement process, that the country should progress in the accession process. Of course, the whole idea of the enlargement has always been the countries that want to accede to the EU, they need to become democratic countries, they need to have a market economy, and they need, of course, to implement the acquis communautaire. So, in a way, these could be very objective, there could be very objective standards of how the enlargement process proceeds. And the job of every delegation of the EU Commission in each of these countries is exactly to gather relevant information on the policy-making process, relevant information on the democratization process in the countries, to issue reports, which then are taken as face value when the opinions are made on the future of the country's accession processes. So what I'm trying to make the last maybe sentence of my introductory talk is that unfortunately the process is very much political. Objectivity is very often thrown away, and this is something which we all suffer from in the region, but also within the European Union.
Okay. Is it working? Milica, please.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. It's such an honor to be here and to talk with you or in front of you, however. Please don't expect from me to hear some bombastic information or never told true. Well, I believe most of the facts will be familiar to you. I'm just a journalist, and I will share with you what I heard, what I learned, and what I saw, so don't kill the messenger. Okay, over the last 5 years, this Berlin process increased regional cooperation on many levels. We can see that. Political, civil societies, youth, sharing knowledge, scientific and business communities too. It also created that important feeling that we are not alone. When I say alone, I mean in our sorrow, problems, different problems, poverty, etc. Okay, Berlin process leads to more effective use of financial resources available for the region. And that's why I think we are losing not just time, but overall benefits while we are waiting EU to finally accept us. On the other hand, I have to say that I understand that delay. It's not easy to fix us. So in public, Western Balkans and the rule of law, how to solve a catch, author Marovic said, we have to talk about that the rule of law is also neglected within the Berlin process framework. By having the rule of law on the summits and regional meetings agenda only from time to time, the contribution of this framework to democracy remains poor. The rule of law is a precondition for all other reforms, and as such should be one of the goals of the Berlin process. And yeah, I think that too. I would like to spare some time for the answer on the second question, because I would like to focus on human rights and the violation of them. So yeah, I will be shorter this time.
Okay, Edlira, please.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and also to the European Academy for Democracy in Poland. It's been such an honor for all of us to be in Poznan as well, and so we were different then, and we are not as happy today as you might see, and maybe I'll be a little bit too frank, and I apologize in advance, but coming from Albania, I have not come over my anger with Macron's statement from yesterday today yet, so this is the result. The way I will speak now is the result of being within 24 hours of the 11th time in a row being rejected by the European Union since 2014 for many reasons. So what are the consequences of this delay? I will speak on behalf of not Albanian politicians or journalists, but on behalf of the Albanian citizens. The way we feel is, and you can read this today all over Albanian newspapers online, is people feel unfair treatment, and we feel discrimination, such a strong word. We feel like we are disliked and unwanted and rejected and somehow despised even, and treated as if we are second-class citizens. These are all words that you could read today as a reply or as a response to what we've heard yesterday on Macron's press conference with Ms. Merkel. Well, first of all, first thing first, Albania has not done its homework. We are fully aware of that. We are not Denmark, we are not France, we're not the Netherlands. These are the 3 out of 28 countries that have said no to Albania. We're not them. But if we keep being left outside, we'll never become them. You cannot negotiate with someone to whom you close the door and constantly and ask them to shut up behind the door because you're making some other decisions inside. And who is inside? Inside is our politicians, who are making these deals and who are responsible for these delays. It's not the citizens that are keeping us hostage of the progress. And these two sides, the European Union and our politicians, are discussing about 3 main things in Albania. It's, first of all, corruption. And again, it's not the citizens who are part of this corruption, it's our politicians who are on the Brussels table. Second thing is our organized crime. Yes, we suffer the consequences of the organized crime as much as anyone else, and our super organized and efficient crime is already present in EU. So our politicians and our criminals are already part of the European Union. Those who are not is our citizens, who are paying the consequences of these 2 main groups. And the third reason that we hear is the enlargement fatigue. Now, if you ask Albanian citizens, they would ask back, oh, did we cause fatigue to the European Union? We've not even been part of them, so how can we be punished for something that we're not part of? So this fatigue does not come from us, so why are we suffering the consequences of something that we did not cause in the first place? So these are the more or less the discussions behind the delays of this EU accession with the citizens. And I brought it to this level because we very often talk in forums like this, or in Brussels, or in newspapers, or anywhere, just about what has not been done and whose fault is it? And of course, guilty as charged, yes, we have not fulfilled the criteria. But the way Albania was rejected, at least this time, is as if it is the fault of the Albanian people, not of Albanian politics, not of Albanian mafia, well, let me just also put it in a bigger context, Balkan mafia, because we are all treated not very differently, to be honest. And it was a big shock for me today. As much as it was not accepted in Albania also, the biggest shock was saying no to Macedonia after so carefully, as a very good student, Macedonia ticked all the boxes, and yet the answer was still no. So it is not easy to be rejected. And rejection and us, now we have become very old friends, it seems like. You have to know that it does not feel good, because I come from a country where some years ago, in 2006, when the Stabilization and Association Act was signed, 97% of Albanians believed more in the EU than they believed in God. If on that day you asked Albanians whether you would go to church or to Brussels today, 97% of them would say, let's go to Brussels, and only 23% were ready to go to church or to mosque. That percentage has now declined. It's below 85%. It's still too high, but you have to see the figures clearly. We thought that only our politicians were not to be trusted, but now we feel like we are let down by the EU politicians as well, and so we have lost trust on that true north of ours as well, that has been the European Union. And so it is not easy to deliver this message to our people, because, as I said, we feel like we do not deserve it, and the approaches of the European Union by always raising the bar and changing the conditions is not working.
Okay, thank you so much. Bona?
Thank you very much, Patricia. Good evening, everybody. Considering the work that I do, I always like to ask myself a question: what does an average citizen thinks about things, about political processes and everything? And the topic that we're discussing today is very, very weird. The reason is this: if you ask an average person in the Balkans, in Serbia and Albania and Croatia, what is the Berlin process, they will say they never heard of it. They never heard of Berlin process. And then if you ask them what is West Balkans, they will also say never heard of West Balkans, right? So here we are talking about a topic using two terms that are definitely not terms used by the populace. Those are political terms created for the purposes of a political process that doesn't have any real connection with an average citizen. As Gita mentioned before, it seems more like this is a discussion and talks between a political system in the Western Balkans and a political system inside of the EU. If you ask people in EU what is Western Balkans, they will tell you they don't know. If this is Western Balkans where we are talking about, then what is Central Balkans? And if we have no Central Balkans, so there's like Eastern Balkans, right? And so there's the big problem that I see with this process is that, considering the fact that entering into EU, necessary reforms, integration, are all things that are based on the knowledge of citizens, of their participation in such a process. And yet, linguistically, from the start, this is doomed in a way to reach a wider audience, because the terms that are used there are not the terms that people are aware of. Now, I'm not saying that we should try to make this topic more banal, but still, whoever was phrasing these things were not thinking about what the people on the ground will feel like. I think it was more of an, Berlin process is called like that because of Berlin, for sure, but the Western Balkans, I think it was some kind of an amalgam type of name for the purposes of avoiding a political discourse between, is it ex-EU countries, but it's not, because we have Albania as well, so it's not that, so we call them Balkan, but we have Romania and Bulgaria already, and so this kind of a term was coined, something that doesn't really live in the mentality of the people. So I think from the start, when we talk about these topics, there's a big gap between what we know, what people in this room know, and what the people who are involved in it, and the people who will have to vote at the end of the day to join EU know. And I think that opens up actually probably the biggest problem in this whole process, and that is that I believe that people in this region are incredibly cynical, in a sense that, I mean, I can give you an example. My grandmother lived to be 97 years old. She spent her whole life living in one house, and she changed 6 countries in that 97 years. From her perspective, she tried monarchy, she tried fascism, she tried communism, she tried democracy. Things did not get that well that fast. So I think there's also a level of cynicism, in a sense that I think that the majority of the countries in the region, at least populations of those countries, look at EU as a source of money, financial. Their goals are financial, and I think that's a huge problem, because if the most of the people are thinking about EU only through terms of, oh yeah, great, open market, I can send my children to live in Sweden, I can sell something, buy something, and it only stays on that level, and discussion only stays on that level, then we will see some new problems opening up, because as we know right now, we will talk about that, I guess, later. There is already Russian and Chinese investments coming into Balkans, and that is the thing, right? Because we are not really comparing those other options in a sense of, the rule of law and human rights, civil rights. No, it's just money now, and I think that's a big problem, because first of all, people do have a right, and they have a complete right to look at their futures through financial gains. But on the other hand, if the whole process claims that it's not just about money, that it is about, this future of this culture and this union of laws, then we are doing a bad job trying to reach the populace. And as I said, on the end of the day, they will be the one who will be voting. We will be the one who will be voting.
Okay, thank you. Gila's first question goes to you from my side. Given the current accession process to the EU, how North Macedonia sees its security policy details and the role of the other security systems in the region? How is the role of the North Macedonia in the region shaped by NATO or other great players in the region?
Well, I will answer this, of course, but let me have an add-on to the first question. What are the consequences of delayed accession? Well, basically, in the 2 countries which have been sort of stopped with the accession, starting the accession negotiations, there might be political consequences. There might be consequences on the rule of Zoran Zaev's government in Macedonia, Edi Rama's government in Albania, and so on. But in principle, I think there shouldn't be very much disappointment in the societies in Macedonia and Albania. There shouldn't be much disappointment, because if you think about what kind of processes have been going on in these 2 countries and in the Western Balkans since the start of the so-called Berlin process, you realize that these countries have not much progressed in the democratization. There are problems, serious problems with corruption, rule of law. There are serious problems with consensus among political elites on the democratization process. There are serious problems in reaching consensus among the ruling parties and opposition in both Macedonia, Albania, but also in Serbia, Montenegro, and so on the game in town, on how to have a democratic institution well functioning. So I think, to be fair, of course, I don't approve of the red light by President Macron, but to be fair, we have not much progressed in democratization since 2014, when this Berlin process was initiated. So I would say there should be mobilization in our societies among all actors, political elites, civil society, university professors, and so on, to speed up the process and to find a common consensus on the democratization process. Now, sorry for this short add-on to the answer to the first question. About the relations between Macedonia and Greece. Basically, they hinge upon the so-called Prespa agreement. You can say that now the relations are good, so you can say that they are very good, but in essence, they depend on the fulfillment of the Prespa agreement. And this agreement was illegitimately and illegally passed in Macedonia. It was very much objected by the then opposition in Greece and now current government. So the question is, what will happen once there is a new government in power in Macedonia and there is the government in power of Nea Demokratia, New Democracy in Greece? What kind of relations they will have? Because we understand that Tsipras, the former Prime Minister of Greece, and Zaev could find a deal which was not supported by vast majority of citizens of Macedonia and of Greece. So the real question of the relations between Skopje and Athens will be when the right-wing party wins in Macedonia and the right-wing party rules Greece. Now, as far as the security system and the influence of different players in the country, I would say that our future as far as security is concerned lays firmly within the NATO alliance. There has been the process of ratification of the accession of Macedonia to NATO. It's finishing up probably by the end of this year and early next year. So as we all expect that the country will become a member of NATO early 2020. Bilaterally, Macedonia has very good relations with Turkey. The Russian influence is, I would say, minimal. China has almost no vested interest in Macedonia except two big loans which were given to the previous government under this Belt and Road initiatives. So I think it's fairly safe case where you can say that this Macedonia will become part of the Euro-Atlantic Alliance and will be firmly in the Euro-Atlantic Alliance, considering also that very huge majorities are in favor of the country becoming a member of the NATO alliance.
Okay, thank you, Milica. Now to the question you wanted to answer from the beginning. How the human rights record has been improving during the last years in Serbia and in the region. Does the accession to the EU work as a stimulant to improve the human rights record? And if so, what will stop the backslide after the accession or if it is denied?
We have to say that all major universal human rights treaties are binding on Serbia. The only UN Human Rights Convention Serbia has not ratified yet is the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, which it had signed back in 2004. Of course, there are national laws that protect human rights. Well, still, there are many obstacles in practice. Lack of knowledge, corruption, etc. I would like to focus on 2 or 3 points on women's rights, workers' rights, rights of sexual minorities, and media freedom of or lack thereof. I'm very happy to say that this year in my town, not hometown, but almost, we held first Gay Pride and we opened LGBT Center in Novi Sad. That is the second city in Serbia after Belgrade who is celebrating equality, love, and differences. But let's talk about practice. Despite the satisfactory normative framework prohibiting discriminatory treatment of persons of a different sexual orientation, equality of sexual minorities still is not achieved in practice. In report of 2018, the European Commission said that LGBT persons were among the most discriminated against groups of the population in Serbia and that they often faced hate speech, threats, and violence, so that's not new information. People I talked to from the LGBT community told me that trans people, especially women, are the most discriminated group. As I learned from them, some basic rights, as right to vote, sometimes could happen to be under threat. So there are really a lot of stories that I know, and I think we don't have time to talk about all that because, yeah, I would like to go through some more things like women's rights. Enjoyment of equal rights, regardless of gender, sex, or another personal feature, is guaranteed by all international instruments ratified by Serbia. So that's clear. National law system is changing. Some improvement happened, really, and I'm proud of that. But I must say, for example, the Gender Equality Act was not enacted yet, although the legislature has been drafting it for 4 years now, so we are waiting, don't know why. Women's and men's labor still was not equally valued in 2018, and of course, today. In many communities, it went without saying that the property was registered in the man's name and they took the important household decisions. That's how it is. The patriarchal gender roles and division of work into male and female is still, of course, widespread and socially acceptable. Men's work is traditionally associated with productive labor, while the roles of women, regardless of their employment status, were associated with non-productive sphere, for example, household and childcare. So that's the same for so many years. Let's illustrate. Maybe some of you remember the slogans encouraging childbirth in Serbia from last year. That was one of the most extreme illustrations of the widespread gender stereotypes and prejudice last year. I will tell you the winning slogans. Love and babies, first thing we need. Then, don't put off babies. Then, Mom, I don't want to be alone, I want to grow. And the last one, but very good one, enough talk, let them be born. So illustrate how embedded gender stereotypes are and the public authorities' lack of understanding of the status of women in Serbian society. That's true. Well, one of the most important topics, and not just for me as a co-author of feminist radio show Women in a Box, is of course violence against women. It is still frequent in Serbia. Estimates are that 1 out of 2 women in this country are subject to some form of violence. Unemployed and economically dependent women are at greater risk of abuse. 30 to 40 women are killed in domestic violence incidents every year without changing. Okay, I would like just a few more words about status of women in Serbia because, of course, women are underrepresented in Serbia's political and public life, but some headways has been made, mostly at the national level. Although Serbia has a female prime minister, women as a head of a parliament and female ministers, we are still missing. Women's perspective, or let's call it feminist perspective in politics, in public speech, image of women in Serbia didn't change at all during years or decades. To be a bit optimistic, I have to say that in public discourse, we can hear more and more feminist topics, and of course, words against it, but okay. And just one more thing about freedom of media, because yeah, that's the most important, or I don't know if I should compare this. The media situation in Serbia has never been worse since 1998, when President Vučić was Serbian information minister. Yeah, we learn about that in faculty. It does come as no surprise that the European Commission issued its most critical assessment of the state of media freedoms in its 2018 report. We cannot hear a lot about that in public speech, but that's true. Journalists continue to experience attacks and threats and an inadequate response from Serbian authorities. Pro-government media continue to smear independent journalists. Reporters Without Borders said that the institution and situation in the media, in Serbia was the worst in the Balkans, and that media frequently resorted to hate speech, and really hate speech and discriminatory terminology is our reality. And talking about that, a group of journalists who fight for media freedom yesterday were protesting here in the center of Belgrade because of constant attacks and physical threats on TV N1 crew, TV N1 crew, and constant harassment on workplace. Media campaigns against NGOs and media branded foreign mercenaries continued. Let's say, just to illustrate, according to a report from the last year of Human Rights Watch, they say between January and mid-August, the Independent Journalists Association of Serbia registered 50 incidents of violence, threats, including 4 physical attacks and 18 cases of intimidation of journalists by state officials. So it's really quite a lot of numbers. I would like maybe to stop here because I don't
So
know.
basically,
maybe I took a
allow
lot
me
of
to
time.
just add, this is while Serbia is still hoping for the EU accession.
Yeah, I mean we are hoping, we are working, but I mean you can hear the information and facts. So
Yes, but at the same time, let's just have a small look into the future. So at one point, Serbia will get yellow or perhaps red light. What will happen then, in your opinion?
that's what I would like to know as a journalist. What will happen? But I would really love to know because there are all the time paradox information that we are getting.
Okay, I think we'll get into the details in the next round of questions. Lira, how would you summarize the current involvement of the youth in the public life in Albania and other states of the region? And what are your predictions for the future, given the erosion of democratic institutions and involvement of youth of the, let's say, old member states and even the new ones like Poland, my home state?
Yes, thank you, Patricia. Really, the Western Balkans has been seen as the youngest part of the geographical Europe, not of the European Union. Apart from Serbia, who has an average age of over 40, the rest of the countries in the Western Balkans are still quite young population. So they are the ones that are affected mostly by what happens with the accession and negotiations processes. But how do our young people see the whole process? To them, some of them were not even born when the Thessaloniki summit was held. We don't believe this, but this is what it is. And so they are now reaching the age of wanting to look for a job or to study abroad, and they hear so much about this Thessaloniki summit, and they have no idea what it was. But for some of them, now the eldest thing is becoming the Berlin process. So imagine even Berlin is becoming something of the past, and already the EU is thinking of restructuring or rethinking or a new strategy on how to deal with our countries. And this is a little bit of a Greek to our youth, who have not been following the process so much. But since that summit, I must say, there's been a slowdown of the integration process rather than accelerating it. And as I said, this influences the most our young people. And there's been also, let's accept it, there's been some democratic and also economic setbacks in the region affecting directly our young people. I don't want to talk about any renewed tensions or stability in the region, because to us, this is something already of the past, and now our young people are thinking of their own individual future rather than what will happen to the stability and peace of the region in the Balkans. The youth from all our 6 countries have one thing in common. They just want to leave this region. They want to have a prosperous future of their own individual future, where they can study and be accepted and be part of this new world. Some teenagers that were born elsewhere in any of the European capitals, they also own a smartphone, and they think they own the future, and they do not understand any obstacles, especially political obstacles that can be put in front of their face and say you cannot have a future because you were born somewhere else, which is not EU. But you asked me about Albania, and yeah, I see them, unfortunately, with now also sitting back in their initial, in 2014, when this whole accession process started, our youth became very interested and very active, and they wanted to become involved in the whole process, and maybe also as part of the Berlin process, have their own forums from time to time. This has now gone. And it has gone because the country is struggling with a very difficult task of breaking down a very long-term pattern of political polarization. So it is not Berlin's fault, it's our own fault, of our ruling elites. But it seems now to be really a mission impossible. Internally, there's no progress. Externally, there's no progress. Our young people are stuck. They don't know what to do in between 2 forces that are just constantly crushing each other. And also tackling systemic corruption in our country has become a kind of a mountain for a Sisyphus efforts, continues, that it's a never ending. And there are some elements that really would define youth participation, and I think we are lacking most of them. First of all, the civic education. or role model for our youth is missing in our countries. Second, youth legal framework. I've heard this morning a very nice sentence of a lady talking about a British lady who's been working in Bosnia for many years. She said Bosnia's been brilliant and ticking boxes all these years, the Bosnian governments, time and again. So have the Albanian governments, including the youth legal framework. We've been ticking boxes marvelously. It's just that in reality, we are missing so much in meeting their expectations to do something for them. Volunteering, which would be something, again, to, or part of exchange programs. There's just lack of a conducive environment to push our youth to do that. And then there's a shrinking civic space, believe it or not. We're living in a donor-driven or party-driven society, not societies that are driven by the demands and really about what our young people need. So there's no real space for our youth who are not thinking with their own heads. And it's already a big struggle for them. And also there's financial sustainability or access to funding is missing for them. You have to belong to something which is either an international donor-driven thing or political party, otherwise you're dead in your efforts. And this discourages our youth to be part of any kind of initiative that would be, let alone to call them like stakeholders or fully participating in processes. So in this scenario, what they really want to do is just, as I said, unfortunately leave. And this is a dramatic situation in the Balkans. I thought this was only a problem of Albania, but it's not. And I've read only yesterday an article at the Balkan Insight talking about figures. And if I thought that Albanian figures of our youth wanting to leave at about 50% of people between the age of 17 and 25 wanting to go, and I thought that was alarming. Then I saw the figures for the other countries in the region, and we're not worse, not better, but this is dramatic. And the thing is, everyone wants to leave from this region, but nobody wants to go to come here. And so I don't know whether this will be an empty region in a few years from now, or what will happen. And clearly our governments deny publicly that we have such a problem, or maybe they are aware of the situation, but they just do not have the means to address this. And in this situation, what would any other country do? If you have youth wanting to live, we expect youth to be active and participating and volunteer and be part of a process that it seems to be never ending. I don't think they have our patience. They're just deciding to do their individual choices, and frankly speaking, I don't judge them for that.
Okay, thank you for that. Bona, how did the political dynamic change in Croatia after its accession to the EU? And are the domestic issues more or less transparent to the media representatives, to the civil society representatives?
Well, everything is perfect and peachy in Croatia. No, it's horrible, actually. To be honest, I think if I would have to compare Croatia to something, I would compare it to that, to the worst type of student. A student that wants to get a diploma only because he heard that diploma is needed, not because he wants to learn something. A student that doesn't learn to understand but remembers to pass the exam, and the moment he's done with it, he just goes back to the old ways and has no work ethics developed. Croatia is last in EU when it comes to investments. Croatia shares the last place with Bulgaria when it comes to corruption. Croatia shares the last place with Romania when it comes to trust of the citizens. Croatia is the last in Europe when it comes to taking out money from the EU funds. It all just crumbled down. Yeah. We were doing good things. We were fighting corruption. We arrested our prime minister. There were new laws and regulations, the civil society, the NGO sector, the freedom of the press. Everything was going fine. And then we entered EU. And then EU said, you guys are fine. And it's not just EU. I actually talked with a lot of people on this summit and the summits before, and there's a lot of always kind of organized conferences when it comes to like countries still in need of development, and everybody forgets Croatia. Because I think people look at the television and they're like, oh, they're in EU, they're in NATO, they have a great football team, their president likes to sing. I don't understand. But everybody thinks things are fine, they're not. They're horrible in that regard. So let me give you an explanation of why is Croatia the last in EU when it comes to taking out money from EU funds. The reason is it's harder to steal from money from EU funds, so better not take it. Because so you have a mayor, for example, that wants to build a bridge, and if a bridge costs 10 million euros, if he takes it from EU infrastructure developing funds, the EU will look for a bill for every euro cent. Yet if he takes it from a local budget, he can make a nepotist deal with some of his whoever business partners. Out of that 10 million, 2 million euros can be stolen just, at the start of the project. And so there is no European oversight anymore. There is no European interference. I think EU looked away and is now looking toward other countries and completely kind of didn't had a system of regulations in place in case a country like Croatia starts moving backwards. And in last let's say 5 years, you can see lack of democracy in Croatia when it comes to the way that it is talked about democracy, the way that certain minority rights are kind of taken away slowly. There is much more political bargaining, but the weird thing is Croatians don't think that EU helped them at all. For example, you have a delegate ombudsman for information, so which is one of the institutions and the positions basically given to us by the EU, and yet the last ombudsman for information was elected during the time of the negotiations. It was a very independent expert that she did her job very good, and the new commissioner, the new ombudsman, is a person that doesn't have any form of support from the Croatian government and no support from the EU. So basically that institution right now is just not working. So I think that what happened in Croatia was that the people were not explained, normal citizens were not explained about the details of the process and how many things were agreed and Croatia didn't finish them. So if you had like 30 different chapters of negotiations, if you would ask a normal voter or somebody who is interested in politics, he couldn't be able to tell you what are the things that we agreed to do and were allowed to enter, and yet when we entered, we stopped doing them. And basically right now, we wouldn't enter. Yeah. So Croatia is now on the level of a country that would probably get a red light just like Macedonia and Albania in that regard. Now, I think that it's very problematic because I think that people were not explained, normal citizens were not explained that when does the story ends. And because Croatia is a small country that doesn't have really that much influence or a population that would in any way kind of lobby for this to better itself, I think that EU, specifically after the crisis, kind of thought Croatia is a small country and what kind of a problem can they do? And I agree in that regard because after joining NATO, as well as now Montenegro joining NATO and Macedonia, if I'm not mistaken, joining NATO, and now even the security issue is kind of taken out of our hands. So, but it's a bad thing. I think it's a really bad example for the other countries in the region because a similar thing can happen to them, or Europe, because of us, can look at those countries and say, yes, you kind of check the box today, but what are our guarantees for tomorrow? And I think that is one of the reasons this enlargement kind of stopped, because right now the Western Balkans is surrounded basically by EU. So therefore, strategically, it is kind of a not important region as the region was important before Bulgaria, Romania entered EU. It was an open border. Now the Western Balkans is not an open border of EU because it basically surrounds the EU surrounds it. And so, on the other hand, I think it's a bad thing because even if it's not this place of instability, the economical gain of EU to gain Western Balkans is less than their potential political risk if those countries and their governments, after joining EU, will move away from EU, because it is dangerous. You have new members that enter, and yet you can see clearly the pattern that the next government will be anti-EU, and the next one after that more anti-EU, and all of a sudden you have this 5-6 states inside of your union that are against the union, and it's a weird situation to be in. Now, right now, just to finish, I think Croatia, one of the reasons why we are not also problematic is because historically we don't have good relations with Russia, and that is the reason why Croatia in the region is one of those countries that is not maybe financially and politically turning politically against EU. You will rarely hear a elected Croatian politician, specifically a politician in the government, who will say bad things about EU. The anti-EU sentiment in Croatia is pushed aside. It doesn't really have a parliamentary voice. Maybe 5% of Croatian parliament is openly anti-EU, and yet at least 80% of the parliament is pro-EU without a problem. And I think in that regard we are unique a little bit, but I think that also comes from the fact that, yeah, people are not aware all the bad things that we are doing, or all the good things we are supposed to do, and yet we are not doing them.
Okay, thank you. Now, since we are shortly falling out of our time frame, just one question that I will need you to answer in 1 minute or less. If not European Union, what else? I know it's a challenge. Try to stick to the time.
Well, look, it's not about EU. It's about our own countries, in our own societies. We need democracy in our countries. We need the rule of law. We need the market economy. This needs to be done whether in EU or outside of EU. I think our citizens have been failed by elites which have not really implemented rule of law, democracy, and market economy. Our citizens have been failed by EU elites which have not kept promises. If you're in Kosovo, you understand that you were promised once Montenegro-Kosovo border agreement is signed, you will get visa liberalization. You did not get it. If you're in Macedonia, you realize that 10 years in a row, the European Commission says start negotiations and the EU blocks Macedonia because it's called Macedonia. These are not things that should have been done. So people understand this and they leave. This is what, I don't know, Albert Hirschman's very famous book, Voice, Loyalty or Exit. If you understand it, you understand very well that the only solution citizens of our country see is exit. Exit in the sense of physical leaving, emigrating, wherever, whoever, from poor to rich, middle classes, and exit in a sense of psychologically distancing yourself from any political processes happening in your country. You don't care anymore. So people do not vote, they're not interested in political talk shows, they're not interested in debates, protests, whatever. This is the sad story.
Okay, Melita? 1 minute.
Yeah, I will be short. I would like just to say that Borna gave you answer that you asked me what will happen. So you see what's happening in Croatia. It's pretty similar situation for journalists. So then you can see. I would like to say that I believe in European Union, but in the way that I believe in solidarity, and I believe that we can fight, like we have that title, Fight for Justice in Divided World. The world is divided in so many different ways. So yeah, I believe, and in that way I don't see the alternative, but I don't think that EU per se would be like beautiful exit for us. We have to work all together. I mean, members of EU and candidates and the others, we have to like really be solid. I know that's just a phrase, but I really believe in that we can fight together. I know that I say like a fairy tale, but I believe in that.
So if not EU, then cooperation with the EU?
I mean, we have to cooperate on global level, call it EU or however. I just can't believe that some people don't care for people from Syria because they are like from Syria and we cannot connect with them. I connect with people, and I believe in people connection without any other, I mean, there's nothing else important for me.
Okay, Edlira.
Patricia, so if not EU, then who? I don't know. Albania does not have a plan B. If EU has a plan B for us, then they are really kindly asked to let us know, because we have absolutely no plan B. We are not like the other countries of the former Yugoslavia, who I don't know, maybe they are thinking of plans B or C or D, but we only have this plan, and geographically we're stuck there, and whether the EU wants us or not, we'll stay there waiting patiently as we've done from the beginning of the times. It's okay, we're used to waiting. It's just our people are looking at schools and hospitals and roads that are being built in Albania by countries that are not EU countries, and this is a little bit confusing. But again, the question goes to, if not EU, then who? It's not the USA, because it's so many miles away and there's an ocean that divides us. So I think we're stuck with EU, and EU has to accept that it is stuck with us.
Okay, Bono.
I don't know, maybe we can join United Kingdom. It seems they're about to lose some territories very shortly. To be honest, it's gonna be the plan B is bilateral chaos, an unfair position in which each country will have to bargain with its neighbors, with big powers. I don't really see a real alternative. The only real alternative is that those nations kind of wish or have a plan to be, I don't know, Norway, Switzerland, but I really don't see that happening that easily or very soon. So no, I do not see really an alternative. But as I said, considering the fact that this region is now surrounded by EU, the alternative can be decades of negotiations, never-ending negotiations.
Okay, last question for me, and please, audience, prepare your questions to our wonderful speakers. The question I have in mind, and it's also 1 minute question for each of you. Okay, so the old Europe is suffering from the enlargement fatigue, but the new, let's say, big bang enlargement states are still quite enthusiastic in a way, that Poland or Czech Republic or Hungary are still enthusiastic about it. What would be your, let's say, advice to those states? What can we do for you to make your life easier?
Well, I think that in principle, what I was saying before, you should really aid the process of democratization and establishing rule of law. Whether this is through mechanisms that support civil society, academia, and so on, or direct help to governments, it doesn't really matter. I think you do a pretty good job with the VISEGRAD fund, and I think you should be continuing doing this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's similar answer what Poland and Visegrad group experience in general can provide to the Berlin process framework and to the Western Balkans, in particular as an embedded cooperation practice between the civil society organizations, as well as their know-how on reconciliation and regional identity. In this regard, they have, or you have, a proven track record, which definitely can serve as an example, and what the Western Balkans can definitely learn from Visegrad countries in general is precisely the creation of pragmatic and systematic structured dialogue in order to tackle issues of regional interest and progressively contribute in your raising of mutual trust. We need that. And what we could hear on the last summit in Poznan a few months ago, Poland has always been a strong supporter of the open door. Further expansion of the EU is the subject of a broad consensus and is backed by both the Polish political elite and society. So according to the Polish officials, without Western Balkans, the EU is not complete or truly united, so I believe in that.
Oh.
I hold you.
Elira?
Okay, with the Big Bang plus the 2 in 2007, there were 12 new votes for the European Union, but about 200 million people or something like that. Now there will be 6 new votes, but guess how many people? Nobody talks about this. 6 new votes, 6 new Balkan countries, and we are only 19 million people altogether, out of which, I did some maths, just before this, 15 million are living in our 6 countries. Out of these 15 millions, only 8 million are working force. And out of these 8 million, 5 million are already employed in our countries, either in the public sector or in the private sector. So this leaves 3 million people in the Balkans. And if this is the big risk, the big tsunami that the EU is so afraid of, and which is the reason why one of the reasons why the doors keeps being closed, then I would kindly ask Poland to explain to your European fellows, how did you manage with 2 million Ukrainians in the past 10 years, where you have accepted them and given them permission, work permission and residencies and everything, and how come Poland has not collapsed with 2 million people? If the 3 million of the Western Balkans will be the reason why the EU will collapse, then we will be happy to withdraw. But if not, then please do help us with this new narrative and tell to your friends, we are at the same position where you've been 30 years ago, the whole Central European countries. So instead of a conversation in Brussels being EU and Western Balkans, can you please say we and the Western Balkans, so all together.
Good
We don't want to
point.
be the others anymore. Thanks.
The last vote, Bona?
Oh, just one quick thing. I was thinking about this before. I don't know why old Europe, new Europe. It makes much more sense. This is old Europe, and that is new Europe, right? Makes sense. This is the old ways. I mean, but okay. No, I think that specifically what Poland can offer is. It's so weird for me to hear that in Poland the public corruption is so low. I don't know how it happens. So the biggest problem I think in the region here is corruption. It is systemic corruption. So any form of legal help, legal aiding, any form of giving us specific examples of how to fight corruption would go a long way. And there's a lot of journalists in this region, a lot of workers, a lot of basically citizens who have their rights kind of being not ignored, but their rights being taken away from the governments. And I would definitely support any form of international help when it comes to that. I think we're not a region where we need humanitarian help now. We're a region that we need legal help now.
Okay, and now the questions are from the audience and not me. I see the first raised hand in the back. Gentleman with glasses, please. You have a microphone over there.
Hello, my name is Tomasz Żernaczuk from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. To the colleague that I happen not to know the name, the last but one, you were asking the moderator to explain to the Polish government why we happen to accept 2 million Ukrainians and we have this division between the Balkans and Europe. There is no opposition vote to these 2 million Ukrainians in Poland, and there is a firm, unbiased and fair support to the European Western Balkans. So you better ask friends from France why they accept and don't accept the European way for the Western Balkans, because I think this is the question we should raise today. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions before we allow the panel to answer. Yep, over there. Do we have only one microphone?
Thank you. My name is Jovan Ratkovic. I'm with Agora Strategy Group in Brussels. I have 2 quick questions for our panelists. First question is regarding Berlin process. I'm wondering whether any of you think that Berlin process has been accelerating or at least keeping on the right track European integrations of Western Balkans. If you do think that, could you please explain me why and how? And my second question is regarding Brexit and the consequences of Brexit, if it really happens at the end of this month, for the future enlargement of European Union. Do you think that the Brexit is going to have a positive or negative consequences on the future enlargement? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question, if we have anything. Yep, the first row here.
Jacob Mardell, I'm a researcher who works on China, and it's been partly addressed, but I'd be interested to hear more on what delayed or denied accession might mean for external actors, especially China.
Okay, I think who's going to start to answer? I think Adlira, you're eager.
Question for me. I think it was misunderstood. I did not ask why did Poland take it. I said, well, it's so good that Poland took it. So how did you manage? So can you please share this success story with the European friends to say there's nothing to worry about taking 2 or 3 million people from wherever they come from, especially if they come from home, because we consider ourselves to be home in Europe, and we are home in Europe. And since I'm here, the Berlin process, has it accelerated or delayed our accession process? It depends from the point of view that you look at it. Some civil society actors might say it has helped because, of course, now in some countries we do have a stronger civil society and a more included one, but the results are what they are. They speak louder than what the political correctness language might say. Today, our countries are further away than closer to the European Union, and I translate this as a kind of failure of the Berlin process for multiple reasons. Yes, for our countries, but also it has happened that during these years since the Berlin process, the EU countries have drifted further away from their commitment to do more for the Western Balkans. And regarding the Brexit, I think it is one of the main reasons why the member countries have drifted away from focusing on us, because there's so much to deal with internally, and Brexit is not a small issue. It is much bigger than the problem of the integration of the Western Balkan countries, and I think this plays a role no matter whether we like to accept it or not. And China is present everywhere in our region, in some countries more than in others. Let's see what the future holds. It depends on the pace and on the acceleration or on the speed of the accession process with the EU, but also it's interesting what is happening with all these some people are heralding this new mini Schengen agreement, others are not, and China is not far from that blurry atmosphere either. But its presence in the region, of China presence, and I think one thing to worry even more about is the presence of Turkey in the region. These are all things that not everybody is happy to observe.
Judas, perhaps?
Well, it's very simple about the Berlin process. It's a consolation prize for the Western Balkans. And I mean, I said it was useful to a certain extent, this youth connectivity, RICO, and roaming, reduce fees, and now you have this sort of idealistic idea of mini Schengen, travel by ID cards, and civil society organizations cooperating, and so on. I mean, okay, there is some things which are good, but in essence it's useless. It's useless because it has not contributed to the democratization of the countries. It has not contributed to the establishment of rule of law of these countries and market economies. Look at the Freedom House indicators. Look at Bertelsmann Index. Look at the freedom of the economy of these countries in 2014 when the process started and today. Has there been any progress? I don't think so. It has been even regress. So, okay, it should be modified if not abandoned. As far as Brexit and the UK, I think traditionally UK, for its own selfish reasons, have been advocate of enlargement. They don't want deepening, so they wanted always enlargement more than deepening. And so in them leaving, we are losing a friend and ally in the enlargement game. But on the other hand, the leaving of UK leaves France mostly and Germany in this period of self-reflection. Where do they want the EU to go? What kind of EU they want in the future? That again might be a beneficial thing for the Western Balkans, but at the moment it seems it's not beneficial to Macedonia and Albania, because French take this process of self-reflection as sort of freezing the accession process. And China, under current government, I don't see any improvement of relations between Macedonia and China in any kind of sphere, because they have such an imaginary fear that if they deal with China more closely, we will jeopardize our Euro-Atlantic future, whatever. So I think it's a bit naive, but that's what their stance is.
Meeta, any comments?
Okay, I would like to say that it's hard for me to see some huge progress as a citizen, especially as a journalist, because on my own example, 3 years ago, we had really, really big problems on public service of Vojvodina. We got great change of in the way of people who are working, and that's just because of political acceptance. So I'm really not a great person to give you answer, because for me and my colleagues it's a terrible situation, never worse. So I know that's not in direct connection with Berlin process, but if you ask me from my professional view, there is no progress. It's even more and more worse. I would like to just give, I really don't have a lot of knowledge about a Chinese relation between Serbia and China, but I have to say that during last days in media, we have so many information and texts about China, who were visiting, our president and China president, they had some meetings, and also some other delegations, even in Novi Sad. So that's like quite important information. We can read a lot about that, and even they I think they realized the idea about two how can I say, two pollution crews. One is Serbian, one is Chinese crew on Belgrade Street and also in Novi Sad. So that's news, but I really, my professional knowledge is limited, so I really just can say that. I really don't know a lot of, but yeah, in public speech, we hear a lot about Chinese presence here.
Okay, before I give microphone to Bona, we'll just take one or two more questions. So if anyone in the audience is ready to ask it just after this answer to those gentlemen. Perfect. Bona, your comment.
Well, quickly, when it comes to Brexit, I believe it will be, like Gita said, something that is a plus and a minus when it comes to enlargement of EU. But personally, I think that England is a rich country, and therefore people in the region do not think that they can compare with someone with England. If it was Romania leaving EU or Bulgaria leaving EU, yeah, people would be much more inclined to look at it and think, oh, what is happening? Is there some kind of a problem with happening now with EU joining or exiting? I think the people here mostly think that United Kingdom has luxury to live, the luxury that countries here in the region don't have. But I would like to go to the question about outside sources of power, or let's say international interests. People are here mentioning China and Russia and Turkey as well. And now I think that historically Russia has a very, very good political connection on the Balkans. It is very friendly to some of the Balkan states. Because of those reasons, historically, Russia believes this is a part of Europe that is a part of their sphere of interest. And because of that, I do not see Russia not always trying to gain more and more influence here. Now, it doesn't have to be a negative thing at all, but to expect that Russia will not try to be part of the political process in Balkans is kind of naive, because they've always been. So I don't see a reason why right now, specifically with the administration that Russia has now, which apparently wants to strengthen their foreign influence, why they would stop now. Although in the case of Montenegro, we've seen that a country that was very much connected with Russia economically, and even now, and slowly militarily at one point, because of deciding to join NATO, it wasn't backstabbing of anybody, but the fact was, yes, there was a lot of traffic, economical dealings, and political agreements that at the moment when Montenegro joined NATO, that things fell through. So if nothing else, that would make Russia think twice of a new approach. And when it comes to China, I think people forget specifically in maybe Central Europe, specifically those countries that were communist countries but were not happy with their communist history. Then in Yugoslavia, the situation was a little bit different. And there was a lot of goodwill when it comes to remembering those days. And our socialism of ex-Yugoslavia is not considered to be the worst type of communist system there was. And China as such has incredible interest because of that in the region. I'll just give you the most ridiculous example. Josip Broz Tito, his birthplace is in Zagorje. It's a region in Croatia. It's his home where he was born was just completely ignored in the last 30 years in Croatia, because the idea is that we should not be celebrating Josip Broz Tito as a communist dictator, but it was bought by a Chinese company just a couple of months ago, because they do have a plan to come to ex-Yugoslavia to look for the local communist monuments and historical locations, and they will come here with money, and they will probably start communist tourism here. And it will be for their own citizens. And they don't care if Croatians don't want to see the new museum. They have a population that will want to come and see it. So it's a very interesting type of investment, not your usual building roads.
Okay, so the gentleman in the back, first question. Oh, sorry, lady in the back, sorry.
Sorry, I'm very small, and thank you to the gentleman for giving me the chance to ask a question. My question's for Mr. Saw. Do you think that if Croatia was today applying, say, to join the EU, it would pass all of the technical requirements? And also I have a second part to my question. What impacts or influence do you think Croatia holding the EU presidency next year might have on maybe bringing attention to the issues of accession in this region? Thank you.
Okay, and now the gentleman in the first row. Any more questions from this side? Perfect.
I would like to use the opportunity that we have Serbia, Albania, and also North Macedonia at the table and ask about this mini Schengen. What I'm trying to scratch my head and wrap my mind around it, but still cannot kind of figure it out. Why exactly these countries? Why now? And why this format? And what is actually the goal? And let me be a little bit cynical. Schengen is about borderless move of people, which is great. But technically, Serbia doesn't have a border with Albania, so why exactly Serbia-Albania? And how about Kosovo? It's over the head of Kosovo, or what?
Well, I guess it depends on the point of view. I think Serbian official persons would say they have a border with Albania. So, I mean, it's not my topic. I don't care this way or the other. But in any case, it's practically speaking, it's absurd to call it Schengen when, at the moment, mini Schengen, of course, in the moment, I, as a citizen of Macedonia, can go with an ID card to Albania, I can go with an ID card to Serbia, and I can go with ID card to Kosovo. So it's not much new there. They have been talking about abolishing tariffs and having a common area, which is something different. So I think maybe they did not really have a precise wording when they thought about the whole process. Maybe they did not really think about what actually Schengen implies and what actually does.
No, I don't have an answer. I really don't know what they mean by that, so really don't know.
Jan, I join your irony, of course, and an Albanian official would say, what the hell are you thinking? We do not have a border with Serbia. So, contrary to our Serbian colleagues, we definitely do not. So how does it work? And then it is ironic because, as she just mentioned, we can travel easily in each other's countries with an ID card already, and the only country where we're still using the passport is Serbia, and that was going to go away anyway by the end of 2021. So what this new mini Schengen, that it is being sold as a big agreement between three guys is, I think we still have to wait a little bit more until we really find out, because it's a little bit of a foggy situation. Definitely it's not explained as it was, and there are, I think, right-founded disagreements or worries and concerns from other countries in the region about these people, these three leaders meeting, and then all of a sudden joining the other three to join, inviting the other three to join as if, you know, this, I would call it, it's an own goal for Rama, for sure. It was not very well received in Albania. Definitely not from our own citizens, neither from the Albanians of Kosovo, which was completely left out of these talks. And what does it all mean? And me as an Albanian, I cannot go to Albania via Kosovo, not even with passport, let alone with the ID card. You know, it's not a matter of borders. So I don't know what kind of matter this is, and it's definitely not a matter of public discourse for the time being. So I fully join the irony with you and look forward to learn more about this. It is not, for some of us, it is not something that we can applaud right now.
May I add, I think that people in Serbia, I don't know if is the situation the same in the other countries, really don't know many things about negotiations, about the process, how you get some idea. So we only know, information at the end. We are not involved in any way. So I think that's the reason when most of the people don't have their own opinion, because they don't know how the process really works. We just got that idea and never doubt it and never think about it. And yeah, that's the question of critical opinion, because we lost that somewhere on the way. We just don't think that's, I mean, of course, that's in generally speaking, but that is missing to criticize, to analyze. We don't have that if you talk about most of the people here.
Oh, and just to add, the Schengen means the free movement of people, goods, and ideas. And if we're talking about that here, then we are already entering a very black area of this mini Schengen. So let's just not discover it right now.
And the last voice in the debate?
So I don't know, to be honest, would Croatia pass now or not. If we were trying to pass, I think we would be able to. But if we had like a surprise test or a surprise inspection, maybe we would fail. Maybe we would fail. Thank God it doesn't exist in Europe. Yes, truly. But to answer the other question, Croatia is now going to be presiding, and I think there was a really big political and diplomatic type of play in the last couple of months coming from the Croatian government and Croatian politicians. We have a president of the Council of Europe right now. We have one of the vice presidents now in the Commission. So, to be honest, Croatia was definitely going to push for the enlargement of their neighbors, specifically their neighbors. Croatia does not want to be a border country. We do not want to be a border of EU. Therefore, we do find it in our interest to kind of push the border further away from us. And specifically with the immigration wave and similar things of border stability, we've been having problems, not just problems on the border, but the political problems arising from that. And but on the other hand, I don't think it's on Croatia to decide. To be honest, if our partners from Europe say something and want something, I do not think we have political power enough to change that, even if we were against it.
Okay, so I think that it is my time to thank you all for participating in the panel despite the late hour, and thank you very much to our wonderful panelists. Join the last day of the Belgrade Security Forum tomorrow, and I'm sure that you will learn something new and exciting as well as today. Thank you. It's not me to answer this question.
No, but for you, how was it?
It was good.
Yeah?
It was fun. People.
Did you have more stage fright than during the Warsaw